Hello, welcome to Unboxed God, where we detox from religion and discover the God who refuses to fit inside the boxes we were given. I'm Tolu Sarah Johnson, and here we explore who God really is, beyond fear, beyond formulas, and beyond everything we were taught to perform. If you're hungry for a real relationship with Him, you are in the right place. Let's dive in. So, this is going to be the fourth commandment in the theme of trusting that we're currently going through, and this is Commandment 42 overall. Don't sell your things in God's house. Trusting God enough to keep worship free from commerce. And I wish people listen to this, but today the Church of God has turned to a commerce. People go in there to make profit, to sell. The pastor sells on the pulpit, the church sells coffee, they sell this. But that was not God's intention at the beginning. And Jesus did not cleanse the temple because he disliked money. He cleansed the temple because he loves people, especially the vulnerable. And because he refuses to let the place meant for communion become a place of transaction. So this commandment sits inside the theme of trusting because he exposes a hard question. Do we trust God to build his house without turning his house into a market like we have turned it today? Do we trust him to provide without manipulating people? Do we trust him to sustain ministry without selling spiritual access? Because the moment worship becomes commerce, trust quietly collapses. And that is what the church is today. The trust is no longer there. But before we go further, let's read the Bible verse that anchors this commandment. And that's Matthew 11:15-17. It says, on reaching Jerusalem, Jesus entered the temple court and began driving out those who were buying and selling there. He overturned the tables of the money changers and the benches of those selling doves, and would not allow anyone to carry merchandise through the temple court. And as he taught them, he said, is it not written, my house will be called a house of prayer for all nations, but you have made it a den of robbers. And I can tell you today that the church has become a den of robbers. It's become a place where people are robbed of their destiny. They are robbed of opportunities. They are robbed of their time. They are robbed of your finances. And God is not happy. And then there's another Bible verse for this commandment. John 2:16-17. To those who sold those, he said, get this out of here. Stop turning my Father's house into a market. His disciples remember that it is written, zeal for your house will consume me. It's sad because that is the church today. The temple was meant to be a meeting place. The church was meant to be a meeting place, not a marketplace. That was God's intention. And Jesus calls the temple my Father's house. And then he names it on purpose. He names its purpose, a house of prayer for all nations. Not a house of sales, not a house of pressure, not a house where people are sized up by what they can give. Jesus is defending the atmosphere of God's house because prayer requires something commerce destroys: stillness, sincerity, reverence, and room for the poor. A marketplace is noisy. A house of prayer is sacred. And when the sacred becomes sales-driven, the poor are the first to feel unsafe. I remember a pastor saying, I can never be a friend of the poor, but you can take their offering to replenish your own life. And they fools? They are fools. And why did Jesus react so strongly in the temple? This is one of the rare moments where we see Jesus visibly confrontational. Tables overturned, merchandise removed, a whip of courts, no negotiating. Why? Because what was happening inside the temple wasn't fundraising. It was exploitation dressed as worship. Money changers were profiting off people who came to honor God. And those selling those were especially serious because those were the poor person's offering. So Jesus wasn't only defending holiness, he was defending the poor from being squeezed in the name of God. And that's what the church does today. They squeeze the poor in the name of God. And they are bold enough to stand on the pulpit and say, I don't have any time to entertain a poor person. But you're taking their dove, you're taking their offering, you are manipulating them, you are destroying them. Ministries like Benny Hinn, they go to Africa. The widows, the suffering, the poor, you know that they are desperate for help and you manipulate it to build your kingdom. That's not kingdom of God. That is your kingdom. So Jesus wasn't only defending holiness, he was defending the poor. And that's why the wording is so sharp. You have made it a den of robbers. Not a den of business people, a den of robbers. Because when worship becomes a system of profit, somebody is getting robbed. Sometimes it is the poor. Sometimes it is the sincere. Sometimes it is the entire congregation. Because the heart of the house is stolen. And I want you to look at this analogy. The hospital lobby turned into a shopping mall. Imagine you walk into a hospital with someone you love. You are anxious, you're tender, you need help. But instead of quiet, you find a shopping mall in the lobby. Salespeople, discount banners. Buy this now, limited offer, give today and get a reward. I've seen so many of that. I'm sure you might have seen as well. Even if some of what they sell is helpful, the atmosphere is wrong. Because a hospital is meant to heal people, not to target them. Yes, and that is what Jesus is saying about his Father's house. When people come in wounded, grieving, confused, poor, desperate into the church, the last thing they should feel is market pressure. The house of God must remain a place where people can breathe again. Yes, because people can't breathe any longer in the church. Because when you look at the modern church today, the modern parallel, today, the tables don't always look like the coins and those. Sometimes they look like turning offering into a mini sermon of pressure, selling access to spiritual experiences, marketing inside worship spaces as a strategy, churches built around the energy of money collection, prosperity-driven messaging that trains people to give out of fear of formula, environment where the wealthy feel centered and the poor feel invisible. And Jesus' issue is not you should never write books or you should never fund ministry. His issue is this: don't turn what is sacred into sales floor. Don't attach spiritual atmosphere to financial pressure. Don't build a system where the house of prayer becomes a place people feel used. Because when the church feels like a business, people stop trusting the church. And sometimes they stop trusting God, because they think God is like the system that represented him. And that's not true. And if you remember the commandment we treated earlier on, which is give to Caesar and give to God, Jesus is also teaching something deeply balanced here. You cannot live responsibly in society, pay what is due. God is not saying you shouldn't pay what is due. But the kingdom doesn't go through manipulations. It grows through love. But today the kingdom has been grown through manipulation. God can fund what he backs. But when leaders stop trusting God, they start trusting pressure. Benny Hinn repented one time that he knows that he pressured people to give him money. He's very sorry. But gave him some time, he went back. Because he doesn't trust God. He trusts in his marketing skills to raise money. And pressure always produces the wrong kind of fruit. It produces guilt, image management, shame-based giving, quiet resentment, and a Christianity that feels like being used. But spirit-led giving produces something else: joy, freedom, dignity, and a church that feels safe again. So what obedience can look like today? Obedience to this commandment is not just don't sell anything. It is deeper. Keep the atmosphere of worship clean. Keep giving voluntarily and private. Keep the poor protected. Keep leadership accountable. Keep the focus on prayer, discipleship, love, and transformation, not commerce. A church can still announce needs. A church can still teach generosity. A church can still fund mission. But it must never become the kind of place where people feel, I came to meet God, and I got marketed to. And that's what happens today. So the trust at the center. This commandment is ultimately about trust. Trust God enough to believe he can sustain his work without turning his house into a market. Trust the Spirit enough to let giving be led, not coerced. Trust love enough to keep worship pure, because Jesus is still zealous for the Father's house, not to protect a building, but to protect what happens inside it. People meeting God. And I hope that this commandment has been a blessing to you. So I shall see you in the next one, which is the last commandment in the theme of trusting. God bless.